You know, Nalanda was one of the most famous because 3 or 4 Chinese gurus came to study there. You know, in the 4th century, Fa Yan came to study there. And it's a very interesting story of Fa Yan because they've written their diaries, they've written their travelogues. And Fa Yan, when he entered India, there was no India then at that time, but we can still call it India. Okay, when he entered India first, the first town, it was a huge town, spick and span, very clean, but nobody. It was like a ghost town. So he was very surprised. So he kept on walking, and must have been a big town because it took him the whole day to reach the border of it. At the border, everybody was in the field. When they saw him, then they invited him back. Like it is said in India, Nepal, Atiti Devo Bhava. So he was invited in, and he asked the Indian that when I came by through the town, there was nobody in the town, all the windows were open, there were no locks in the doors. Don't people steal? And interestingly, the Indian asked him, steal? What does that mean? Very interesting. That was the golden age of the Indian subcontinent, when Buddhism reigned the Indian subcontinent. You know, Aryabhat, nowadays a lot of Hindus, I've seen it in YouTube, they have all this Tripunda and so on. But Aryabhat was a teacher in Nalanda. He was a Brahmin, but he was a teacher in Nalanda. He was a Buddhist. He was the first man to conceive of zero, mathematical zero. You know, that's what Bertrand Russell told. One Indian journalist had gone to UK to interview Bertrand Russell. He was a mathematician. And when the door opened, he rang the bell, the door opened, then Bertrand Russell said, you Indians have given nothing to the world. So the Indian journalist said, but, and he laughed and said, by nothing I meant sunya, you know, zero. And mathematics, zero, was invented in Nalanda, you know. And he was a Brahmin, but he was a Buddhist, Aryabhat. There were observatories, astronomical observatories in Nalanda, in Vikramasil, in Odantapuri, in Sompuri, all over astronomical observatories. And that was 4th century, you know, the world's oldest learning house, university. 6th century, 200 years later, Winsang came to study there. Winsang studied for 12 years. He was a brilliant Chinese. So the Indian gurus, and there were some Nepalese called Lila Vajra as well, teaching there, requested him to stay on and teach in Nalanda. You know? And Winsang writes that there were 10,000 students in Nalanda from all over the world. Antioch in Greece, Alexandria in Egypt, Persia, Central Asia, Indonesia, all over the world, 6th century AD. Now, 10,000 may not sound like a big number to Indians. India is such a big population, but you have to understand that this was 600 AD, you know, not 21st century, 600 AD. That was a huge number at that time. And he traveled all over India, and he has written his travelogue, or what he saw all over from South India to Nepal. You know, he traveled up and down, and he has written on the travelogue, and we know how India was at that time. You know, and that's why we know 75% of the Indian subcontinent was Buddhist. You know, Buddhist. And then, I'm sorry, I know all of you, most of you are Hindu backgrounds, but the 6th century was a terrible beginning for Buddhism. And 2 Brahmins, not all Brahmins, 2 Brahmins, Kumaril Bhatta and Sankaracharya, were terrible. You know? And this is written in Sankar Digvijay and Sankar Vijay, 2 of his oldest biographies. Kumaril Bhatta took the army of Sudhanva, King Sudhanva, and killed all the Buddhists in Kerala. Young, old, doesn't matter. Destroyed thousands of stupas and destroyed biharas. Kerala was the first country in the Indian subcontinent where Buddhism vanished. Then Shankaracharya, who was a little bit younger than Kumaril Bhatt, but contemporary, they met each other, took Sudharma's army, and wherever he went in the Indian subcontinent, where there were no Buddhist kings, they killed Buddhists. I'm sorry to say this, but this is written in Shankar Digvijaya and Shankar Vijaya. In Shankar Digvijaya and Shankar Vijaya. He killed. This was Shankar Digvijaya. Many Indians think Shankaracharya debated with the Buddhists and defeated them, and that is how Buddhism vanished. That is not true. The Shankar Digvijaya does not show him debating with Buddhists. He debated with other Hindus who were non-Advaita, and defeated them. But he has tried to refute, I call it tried, to refute in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya, called Sarirak Bhashya, Buddhist Chittamatra, Shunyata, all these different things. But if you know Buddhism and if you also read Brahma Sutra Bhashya, you understand that Shankara did not understand Buddhism at all. For example, Shunyavadi in chapter 3, verse 32, 31, he says, as for Shunyavadi, Sarva Pramana Vipra Prasiddha. Emptiness, Shunyata, is contradictory to all logic. How can things arise out of emptiness? But that is not the emptiness of Buddhism. Buddhism never said everything arises from emptiness. Emptiness is a very subtle and very complex thing in Buddhism. It is used for meditation, not intellectual thinking. And the way he refuted Shunyavad, you can see he did not know what the Buddhists meant by Shunyata. So if he had debated with Buddhists, I'm sure he would have lost. He would have lost easily. But he did not debate with any Buddhist. So this is what Shankaracharya did. This is not about Brahmanism, because during that period, after Shankara and Kumaril Bhatta, many Hindu kings also started destroying Buddhist places. Sasank of Bengal cut the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya and burned the stump. Fortunately, another sprout came out still. This is Sasank of Bengal. Gaud actually, but it's in Bengal now. Gaud. Pushyamitra did the same kind of things. He destroyed monasteries and so on. He established the Sunga dynasty by killing King Ashok's great-great-grandson and becoming the emperor. And he started destroying Biharas and so on and killing Buddhists and so on. But it's not straightforward. His own grandson built Biharas. So it's a kind of mixed thing. But nevertheless, there were many Hindus who did that. During those periods, there's in the Chalukya Empire in South India, there's an inscription, Chalukya inscription, where it says Mahamandaleswar Virupasara is like a forest fire for Buddhists and Jains. It means he went around destroying Buddhist places and so on. There's an inscription still there. And Kalana, a Brahmin from Kashmir, wrote Rajatarangini, in which he writes that the Shaiva king Mihir Kul was a Hun king, but he was a Shaivite, destroyed 16,000 stupas from Kashmir to Afghanistan and killed Buddhists and gave the lands to Brahmins. But to credit the Brahmins, many Brahmins refused to take them. Many Brahmins hid Buddhist people in their houses so that they would not be killed. So it's both sides. It's not just Brahmins, but still these are historical records. This weakened Buddhism a lot. But still, Nalanda, Vikramashil, Odantapuri, Sompuri, Jagadalla continued. And then came the last blow. 13th century, Bakhtiyar Khilji from Afghanistan. Afghanistan had become Muslim by then. It was all Buddhist. You know, 15 or 20 years ago, the Taliban broke the statue of Buddha in Gandhar. Right? Gandhar was part of the Bharat Varsha. You find even in Mahabharata, Gandhari, Gandhari. But by 13th century, they are all become Muslims. Afghanistan, Iran, Central Asia, all through the Silk Route had become. There are remains of ancient Buddhist monasteries throughout the Silk Route, even till today, to China. Because Buddhism entered China through the Silk Route. And China was the first major civilization that it went to, as early as 100 to 100 AD. It has already reached China. Kumarajiv was a Brahmin from India who took it first to China. Amoghbhadra from Nepal went to China. And many, Bodhi, Ruchi, many teachers went to China and they translated, helped translate. And people like Wensang, Fa Yen, I Ching came and studied Sanskrit and went back. And they translated. In the same way, before the last Islamic invasion, Buddhism had entered Tibet. 200 or 300 years before the 13th century, 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th century, Guru Padmasambhava was the first man from present-day Swat Valley in Pakistan, was called Udiyan. In Tibetan, it's called Urgen. He was from there. He studied in Nalanda. He went to Nepal and meditated in a cave called Asura Gufa. He meditated there and became enlightened there. And King Trison Detsen of Tibet invited him there. So he was the first man to propagate Buddhism in Tibet. But actually before him, Shanta Rakshit, a Brahmin again, from Nalanda, had gone to Tibet. But in Tibet, there were a lot of black magic. And Shanta Rakshit told the king, I am a bhikshu. I can deal with these people, but that's not the work of a bhikshu. I shouldn't be doing these kind of things. So called Guru Padmasambhava. And once he established things, I'll come back again. My work is to make bhikshus to teach, not to deal with black magicians. So he came back to Kathmandu, and Guru Padmasambhava went up there. And he defeated all these other people, and finally King Trison Detsen declared Buddhism to be the religion of Tibet. And then, there's a long story, many things happened. There was a king called Langdharma who persecuted Buddhism and so on, but just to cut the story short, it continues in Tibet till today. And when Bakhtiyar Khilji came into the Gangetic plains and went to Nalanda, he became near Nalanda, he became sick. And there were two mistakes they made. They thought all the monasteries were army camps and the bhikshus with the same dress were army. And the second is like Bakhtiyar Khilji became very sick and their Hakim could not cure him. So then one monk from Nalanda went to him and told him, we can cure you. But then he was like, for Muslims it's kafir. So he was a bit hesitant. And he said, you don't have to leave a religion. You can follow your religion. We'll just give you the medicine. So they devised a very clever way. They took the Quran and in the leaflet, they put medicines. So they told him, you read your Quran, every page you turn, you lick it. And so that's what he did. And he became healed. He was healed. Then, unfortunately, that was even worse for Nalanda because he thought, wow, these people are so powerful. They are better than us. We can't let them live. We have to destroy them. So he attacked Nalanda. And they killed as many monks as they could, and as many gurus as they could. Many gurus fled, escaped. The head of Nalanda, what we could call today's language the dean of Nalanda, but he was called Upadhyaya. In Tibetan, it's called Khenpo. In Sanskrit, Upadhyaya. And was a Kashmiri Brahmin called Sakyasri Bhadra. he escaped and watched from afar them burning Nalanda and so on, and he wept. And he wept and he said, now Buddhism is finished from Bharatvarsha. He went to Nepal, stayed a couple of years there. Then with some Nepalese gurus and him, they went to Tibet. You might have heard the word Karmapa. He lived in India for a long time. And now he's in the US or somewhere else, I don't know. Karmapa, this is the 17th Karmapa. The first Karmapa was given the title Karmapa by him. Sakya Shree the Upadhyaya of Nalanda. And he gave the title of Pandit to a Sakya Guru. Sakya is not Sakya Muni Sakya. It's a Tibetan word. Sa means ground, Kya means like clay colored. Clay colored. So that area was called Sakya. And so when a monastery was established there, then the whole system was called Sakya. So Sakya Pandit, the title Pandit was given by Sakya Shree He was brilliant. It is said he spoke Sanskrit when he was born. And he studied Sanskrit, and it is interesting, he debated with 9 Indian Pandits and some Nepalese Pandits in Sanskrit, and he defeated them. It is interesting that when he spoke in Sanskrit, because he was a Tibetan, his enunciation was not correct, the Indians laughed. But he defeated them in the debate. He defeated all of them, and this was historically, in the entire history of Buddhism, no scholar or guru from outside the Indian subcontinent ever defeated gurus of the Indian subcontinent in debate. This was the one and only one time when Indian gurus were defeated by a Tibetan. No Chinese, no Tibetans, no Mongolians, never defeated Indian gurus till then. And then he brought out all the books. You can imagine how much knowledge was destroyed, because this university was running probably 3rd, 2nd century onwards, and this is the 13th century. So almost 1,000 years. The world's oldest university, actually. 90 million books, according to Bhaktiar Khilji's own diary. 90 million books. And the pile of book, if you burn a pile of book, it turns red, cinder. It took 6 months for the cinder to die out and 9 months for the smoke to finish off. That is the extent of destruction that happened to Nalanda. Then the same thing happened to Vikramashila, which is somewhere in between Bengal and Bihar. Same thing happened to Odantapuri near Odisha, Sompuri, same thing, completely wiped out. Now, it is not only the Buddhists that were killed like this, Hindus are also killed. There is a saying, Muhammad Ghori brought all the Brahmins and to ask them, do you want to be Muslim or do you want to die? Some became Muslims, some said, I would rather die. So his head was cut off and his thread, the janai, was taken out and thrown into the cart. And it is said that 74 cartfuls of janais were thrown out into the ocean. So a lot of Brahmins and Kshatris were also killed. But the greater blow was for Buddhism. Because Brahmanism or Hinduism was in villages. The Muslims could not possibly go to every single village and seek them out. Buddhism was all camped in Nalanda, Vikramashila, all this, so it was easy to attack. And because of that, 1 century, 2 century, 3 century, 4 century, 5 century. See, Buddhism reigned the Indian subcontinent for 1700 years. So it took 500 years for it to vanish. Why did it vanish? Because there were no gurus to explain, to teach. Buddhism is not a faith-based system. You cannot have Hare Buddha type of Buddhism. It just doesn't exist. Buddhism is based on pragya. There is Shraddha also, of course, but basically pragya, wisdom. You have to understand. You have to understand why you are meditating. You have to understand the type of meditation you're doing. You have to understand why this meditation brings this result. And why do we meditate this way in Buddhism? All this must be understood. It is not a matter of just meditating any meditation. There are specific types of meditations towards a certain direction, and that has to be understood. And to understand that, you need gurus who understand them. When all the gurus were killed or ran away to Tibet, in Nepal, Tibet, then there was nobody to explain them. But still, it took 500 years before it completely vanished from the Indian subcontinent. And people became integrated into the general mass of Hinduism. Buddhism could not be integrated like Vaishnavism and Shaivism, because Vaishnavism and Shaivism is theistic, and Hinduism is theistic, Ishwarvadi. Buddhism is un-Ishwarvadi, non-theistic. And Vaishnavism, Shaivism believes in an Atma. So it could be integrated in later centuries into Hinduism. Buddhism could never be integrated because it does not believe in an Atma. There is no Atma. And Jainism was integrated to some extent because it believes in an Atma. But still the Jains don't agree that they are Hindus. So after 500 years, 13, 14, 15, 16th century, finished. Buddhism was lost. But actually, it was not completely lost. Somewhere between Orissa and Andhra Pradesh, there was a school, a sampradaya called Mahimna Sampradaya. During the British era, when the British took statistic, they claimed that they were Buddhists. So the Buddhists, the English asked them, well, before you used to call yourself Hindu, why do you call yourself Buddhist now? And they said, if we had not called ourselves Hindus, the Hindus would have prosecuted us. That's very interesting, and that's why we pretended to be Hindus. But we are actually Buddhists. But I studied their literature, it's all mixed up. It's not pure Buddhism, It's all mixed up. Still, after centuries and centuries, it's bound to happen. It's bound to happen. So, this is how gradually Buddhism completely vanished from the Indian subcontinent. And then, through the centuries, Hindu swamis, gurus started teaching all sorts of nonsense about Buddhism. They never studied Buddhism. They had no idea what Buddhism is. But they just felt like they are gurus, so they can blurt out anything about Buddhism. And right till today, you watch Sadhguru, he's talking all nonsense about Buddhism. Why doesn't he just talk about Shaivism? He's a guru of Shaivism. Talk about Shaivism. Why does he have to comment on Buddhism, which any Buddhist, when you listen to what he says, will laugh? Because that's not Buddhism. One example he gave in one hall, I think it was in Bombay itself, somewhere in Bombay, one man got up and said, what's the difference between Buddha way and Shiva way? And Sadhguru, if I was him, I would say, I don't know about Buddhism. I know about Shiva way, I can talk to you. That would be honest. But he said, Buddha taught, the Shiva taught 112 ways. In that talk, he did not mention where he brought that from. That's from Bhigyan Bhairav Tantra, 112 shlokas. And the Buddha taught one of them. That's completely nonsense, because of the 112, there are two, not one, which talks about breathing. But those both shlokas about breathing has nothing to do with anapanasati in Buddhism. Second, the Buddha did not teach one way. He taught 84,000 ways. 84,000 ways. And those 84,000 ways are subdivided into 4 schools, four major highways. One is the way of renunciation, in which you renounce everything that is related to kama, krodha, lobha, and avidya, ignorance and affliction, emotional defilements. And to the degree you renounce them, you gradually become free of them. It's a slow process and very difficult, not an easy way. Like if I had held a rose in my palms, then if I let go, renounce the rose, there'll still be a smell of rose here. But if I keep on holding the rose again and again, the smell is not going to go away. But if I let go of renounce the rose and don't touch it anymore, gradually the smell of the rose will go away. That's the principle behind it. The Shravakyana, like Theravada, is based on this method. Basically, it has other methods also, not only this, but its emphasis is on the way of renunciation, Tyaga Marga. Then we have the way of antidote, that is Pratipaksha Marga. Antidote means, opposite medicine. Opposite medicine, if I have anger, hatred, I'm an angry type of person, I meditate on compassion, on loving kindness, Maitri, Karuna. And through that, I negate my anger within me. I'm greedy, I'm attached, I want this, I want this, I want this. Dan, giving, giving. Gradually my attachment, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, decreases. Dana paramita, as it is called, and so on. And I have this sense of I. Everybody has that, right? From birth till now. But it's not a question of just sense of I. We believe, even if you're not a philosopher, we believe, I believe, I'll say, let's say I believe that 10 years ago, I was the same I today. What does that mean? Even if you're not a philosopher, it means I'm unchanging. I have not changed. This is where Hinduism and Buddhism parts. In Hinduism, this unchanging I is made into the Atma, or Brahma. In Buddhism, we do Vipassana. B means Vividena Visheshena. Vividena means holistically, Visheshena means specially, Pashyana means seeing. Seeing whether there is truly an unchanging I here. If you really sit and see through, then you see there is no unchanging I there. So therefore there is no Atma. And so here is where Buddhism and Hinduism parts. It's a complete antithesis. And that is the reason why there are no Buddhists who are Hindus. Like Vaishnavas who are Hindus, Shaivas who are Hindus, there are no Buddhists who are Hindus. They just dissolved into Hinduism as a whole, not remaining Buddhist anymore, because it was totally antithetical. Through the centuries, it vanished, but Buddhism left its stamp in what is called present-day Hinduism. Many anthropologists believe that 50 to 60 to even 75% of the concepts and ideas of Hinduism today was derived from Buddhism. That is where Buddhism does not agree with Hinduism. There is no such thing in the whole universe. Mind, awareness, whatever, they are all changing, continuously changing. There is no unchanging awareness. Drashta, Gyata, Sakshi. There is no such thing. So that's the reason why Buddhism completely vanished from the Indian subcontinent, but it continued to remain in Nepal and northern belt of Nepal, where it leaked down from Tibet. It leaked down from Tibet, and so the northern belt of Nepal is pure Buddhist still. And further down into Nepal, also they are Buddhist, but they are not so well educated in Buddhist ideas as much as the northern belt. And in the Kathmandu Valley, there's an ethnic group called the Newars. They have been following Sanskrit Buddhism for thousands of years. They still continue, but because the pressure of Hindu kings, they have become very weak, unfortunately. But it still survives. So that is how Buddhism vanished from the Indian subcontinent.